becoming digital media, but I think that you also have to understand that all politics is becoming digital politics. It's online, it's fast-paced, the unexpected happens every day, and it's action-packed. I mean, the biggest thriller in America today are the outcomes of the midterms. The ups and downs of the political primaries this season have produced some of the most unexpected results in years. Online activities have been the central driver behind the changes that we're seeing in politics today. We see it in fundraising, we see it in the rough and tumble of the campaign, we see it in organizing, and we're seeing it in who wins and who loses. Now, I'm gonna date the beginning of internet politics or digital politics to the campaign I was in, the 1996 presidential campaign, when President Clinton sent the very first email a president had ever sent. It was his first email during those 5 years. It was also his last. Now the President of the United States is routinely tweeting while he's part of a town hall, showing that digital communications is communications. It's part and parcel of politics today. Now, before you can really, I think, understand how the blogosphere and new social media and the internet are affecting politics today, I think you have to look at 4 or 5 of the big changes that we're seeing. First, there's a surge in independence. This is not a red and blue country. If you go back to when polls started in around the 1930s, you can find that about 85% of Americans were in fact Democrat or Republican. Today that's not the case. In fact, it has been a straight line up over the decades that we are now approaching, in most polls, something close to about 40% of the voters who say that they're not really affiliated with one party or another. This surge in independence is perhaps the biggest single change in politics. And it overcomes the myth that it's just a red-blue country. The biggest party in America, in many ways, is no party at all. Second, in the parties themselves, you're seeing a dividing up or a balkanization of the parties. In 2007, I wrote in Microtrends that one party or another, most likely the Republican Party, would become unstable and broken apart by movements that couldn't reconcile themselves. The emergence of the Tea Party has in many ways, in my view, destabilized the party because the party has been unable to reconcile both the religious social conservative views and the economic social conservative views into a single cohesive message or whole as a party. And that is becoming more and more obvious as new movements emerge, frankly, in both parties. There's a wave of discontent. It's perhaps one of the longest periods of American political voter discontent. Certainly in the nearly 35 years that I've been polling, we've seen these periods of discontent. We've seen them in 1992. I go all the way back to when John Anderson started as an outsider candidate. We've seen these times, but they generally have come and gone fairly quickly. We're really seeing since really 2006, when I think it was really registered, but I think you'd go back to 2004, sustained voter discontent and sustained voter discontent with both parties and presidents of both parties. There's an unsatisfied demand for change, right? We know the change did extremely well in 2008. We know that the voters still want change. They still want a different kind of government. They still want a different set of politicians. They still have not really achieved the kind of change that they're expressing, and I'll come back to that in a second. While the country itself has moved more nonpartisan, politics has moved more partisan. You see less cooperation, less reaching across the aisles, less true bipartisanship now after 2 presidents, both of whom promised to bridge the divide, neither of whom has been successful at doing that yet. And I say yet because there's a lot of years to come. And Surprisingly, money is pouring into politics. I used to joke that we spend more on advertising a hamburger than we spent on all the presidential campaigns combined. That's no longer the case. We actually spend more on politics than on a hamburger. And I think that if you look at it, all of the attempts to limit money have backfired. Between the internet, which has allowed small donations to pour in, and the Supreme Court that has allowed large donations to pour in, the combination is something completely unexpected, which is that actually there's more money in politics than ever before. And there's also an emerging pattern or change in voter behavior that several percents of the voters are now willing to contribute to politics. Again, when I was doing the '96 campaign, I was asked to do a poll of Democratic donors. The median age of Democratic donors at that time was 74. Okay? There was no history of general political giving. Who would give to a politician? Right? Why would they give to a politician? Right? The whole notion of that, I think, wasn't really ingrained. I think that's changing. I think you're seeing the internet is playing an obviously big role in allowing small donations now and actions and activities of the voters to count in again. Just as voters thought that they were powerless, passive listeners of television commercials, the internet came along and made them active participants in new movements. That is the fundamental thing that you all are driving and doing. So, what do people want? Well, I did a poll recently for the Aspen Institute on the Constitution, and I went in with the theory that people were impatient for change, and therefore they would be interested in getting rid of checks and balances. Well, that hypothesis did not make it. It turned out to be quite the opposite. The voters, I think, reinforced in that poll that they favored checks and balances, and they rejected more presidential power. They rejected longer congressional terms. They rejected eliminating checks and balances. And what did they favor? They favored direct popular election and getting rid of the Electoral College. They favored electing Supreme Court judges and limiting their terms, right? And they favored national referenda. Now, what's the pattern in that? The people favored more power to the people, not to the politicians. It's a clear pattern. And you see that that is, in fact, what is playing out in politics today. The tension between the demand for change and the fact that they want the change to be more ground up and to involve them more. They're better educated, they're more informed, they have the world's information at their fingertips, they read everything that goes on. They want to challenge government to involve them in their everyday. And I think that is, again, where you're playing a big role. So I think some specific things, I think that clearly you all are doing and the changes are doing. First, you're lowering the cost of communication, and you're lowering the barriers to entry for political action by people. That is the biggest impact both your writings are having, the access to the internet is having, that social media is having. All of that, I think, is coming through based on that. It means that people could get into politics now with less rather than more, particularly on the lower level. And it means that they can extend communications to such a great extent that it's not all about the 30-second TV spot anymore. The left and right have put together solid communication channels, whether it is the blogosphere on the one hand and MSNBC on more the Democratic and left side, whether it's Drudge and Fox News on the right side. There are greater information channels now that connect all the media together on the right and the left. There's no corresponding channel in the center.